In our last episode, we head out in our newly built home on wheels. This time around, we find ourselves way out in the middle of nowhere and all alone in the desert. After our maiden voyage in eastern Oregon, spent with some good friends, we were heading south looking for warmer weather. But with a big old natural wonder a mere 50 some odd miles away, we decided to take a little detour. And we were gonna do Mach 12 down a big old bunch of dirt roads to get there.
We made it. It's the Alvord Desert. Only about 50 miles of dirt roads to get here. Whew. And no cabinets fell off the walls. It's a miracle! Pretty cool.
Do a donut?
I love donuts.
And with that hint of a suggestion, of course you gotta see if this beast of a home on wheels would pull a couple of donuts. And with a couple of pretty amazing donuts in the bag, we were off to find ourselves a spot to camp. And as everybody knows, when you've got roughly 70 square miles of wide open space in front of you, you gotta get right in the middle.
Look at this place. This is the Alvord Desert. Pretty awesome. We got it all to ourselves. There's nobody here. This place is roughly 9 miles long by about 5 miles wide. And we're smack dab in the middle of it. Because there's nobody around. It's the driest spot in all of Oregon right here. We're shadowed by the Steens Mountains, which are right over there, which makes a pretty amazing little backdrop for this spot. Tons of cool stuff to see everywhere. This one's pretty high on the list of cool spots. We weren't exactly heading here today, so we took about a 50-mile detour down some fairly rough dirt roads to get here. Actually, they weren't terrible, a little washboardy, but surprisingly, our van is still holding together. It's a miracle. No cabinets have fallen off the walls. That's a success.
And you may be wondering what on earth you do if you find yourself in the driest spot in all of Oregon. Well, not much, and that's kind of the point. But of course, there's some pretty amazing scenery to look at, which can occupy a bit of time, and then there's rush hour traffic. But after those two other campers we saw worked on their world land speed records racing across the desert and that rush hour traffic died down, then you're back to admiring some pretty amazing scenery. But if that's not enough, or if scurvy sets in, then you gotta do what you gotta do to keep yourself entertained.
Perfect form. Perfect
It's a long way in every direction. It's like we're stuck in the desert. Our home is somewhere over there. Holy crap, it's a long way out here. This place is huge and there's nothing here. Well, I gotta say, for real, I don't know that I've ever been in a place like this. I can't think of one. And last night, this was the quietest I can ever remember. I didn't hear anything. Slept pretty great. The van working out like a champ, especially out here. It was cold though. It got down to 22 degrees. It's time to head south for warmer weather. Only 3 miles to go to get home.
Well, I think it's time we have another little talk, mainly because it's kind of cold outside. There's nothing much going on here in this desert. So, it's time. So, if you've watched our last episode, as always, thanks for watching. But I mentioned a little bit then, I've been sort of struggling with whether or not I want to keep these videos going. It seems like there's a bit of interest, at least in this van versus sailing lifestyle. So, I'm going to try to at least get a handful of these things out because there's some topics I want to cover, and mainly it's because they're questions that I've been asked. So I put together a list, and for the next few episodes we're going to try to cover some of these topics. But beyond all the questions I've been asked, there's a few topics that I'd like to talk about. So bear with me, we'll see how this goes. Well, if you've been watching these videos for a while, then you probably know that we've actually been full-time travelers for getting close to 6 years now, which to me is kind of amazing. The fact that we've been able to do it, I don't know, it's amazing. And the fact that we still enjoy it and enjoy each other living in these tiny little bitty spaces, that's equally amazing. But I will say, when I first started dreaming about doing this sort of thing, there was no sort of van involved. It was purely a sail around the world trip. It was always just sailboat oriented. That was the goal for me. But the funny thing about sailing is that it's really seasonal, more so than I ever thought it would be. I really thought that after maybe 6 years of sailing, we'd be, if not all the way around the world, we'd be awful close. Maybe Madagascar by now, something like that. I don't know. But not in a van in the middle of a desert in southeastern Oregon. You can keep sailing if you really wanted to. Just keep going ahead of hurricanes and cyclone seasons and just keep moving. But there's a whole lot of stuff to see out there. And to do that, you've really got to skip a lot of stuff. That was kind of what we figured out in our first season out. We went up the Inside Passage towards Alaska. We got halfway to Alaska, and all of a sudden the season was over. It took us 4.5 months to get from Seattle to halfway to Alaska. And we only scratched the surface. So my first thought when we left is that we would get from Seattle to Alaska, Alaska to Mexico, Mexico to the South Pacific, and we'd just keep working our way around the world really fast. I'd never had any sort of travel like this before where we had this big extended period of time. So the first season out was kind of a shock. There's just way too much to see than you can fit in. So it quickly became apparent that we needed to slow down to see all that stuff. Right now, we've been out for almost 6 years. We've hopefully got another 40 years in us. Who knows? But for us, the pace of travel is nothing like what we thought it would be when we first started. So I think really if there's one point I can make with all this nonsense I'm putting out is that there is way too much to see and not enough time to see it.
that's just a fact of life. And for us, we're not really willing to skip something just to get somewhere else. So I think that's sort of why it's taken us almost 6 years to get to Southeast Oregon from Seattle. It's like this far on a map. But in between those 2 points, I mean, you could spend a lifetime. So we're trying to see it. We're trying to see as much as we can. And I think that's about all I'm going to say for today. But in the next handful of episodes, we'll try to answer some of the questions. I still want to get a tour of this van out because it's kind of amazing, I think anyways. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks again for watching. I think tomorrow we're moving south. It's getting colder and colder here. Yeah, we're ready. Warmer weather, southbound. See you later. And so, after a few days spent way out in the middle of the Alvord Desert and having it all to ourselves, we were out of here. And with no real destination in mind, other than dreams of warmer weather, we pointed our mighty ship south. But not before covering another 50-some-odd miles of dirt roads, doing Mach 12 in our little home on wheels. Well, there goes the Alvord Desert. That place was pretty awesome. I still can't think of any other place I've been like it. Pretty amazing. Very unique and amazingly quiet. There was nobody there. Not a breath of wind. Quiet as quiet could be. Pretty cool. If you want to get away from everything, that's the place to go. Today we're heading south, hopefully for warmer weather. We don't know where we're going to end up yet, but definitely looking for warmer. Low 20s again last night. Cold! And after a few hours of driving, we found ourselves tucked up in some pretty incredible trees just outside the town of Winnemucca, Nevada. And beyond the fact that Water Canyon is just a mere handful of miles outside of town, which makes it an easy and convenient stop for the night, these little camp spots, tucked away in some pretty gorgeous aspen trees, well, they're free. And it's hard to beat some free camping. Well, this place is called Water Canyon, just outside the town of Winnemucca, Nevada. And I don't care what you think about the town of Winnemucca, it's just plain fun to say, Winnemucca, Winnemucca, Winnemucca! That never gets old. But this is Water Canyon. It's a BLM recreational area, free camping, some pretty nice camping spots, and it's going to be a nice spot for the night before we move on. 3 hours was about as much as I wanted to spend in the car today, so here we are. But it's been really cold lately, like really cold, so kind of been dying for some warm soup. So here we got a nice picnic table. We're going to cook up some squash soup. Who doesn't love squash soup? Squash. Tasty and good for you. So in this soup, there's going to be a lot of good stuff. Granny Smith apple, a little bit of onion, red pepper, some ginger, and coconut milk. A little bit of spice too, some red peppers. All of this is going to take place in a pressure cooker. If you're a vanner or a sailor, pressure cooker's key. Cooks everything pretty fast. So we're going to start with some onions, a little olive oil. Once the onions are all soft and smelling good, everything else goes in. Piece of cake. Once all this stuff is packed into the pressure cooker and the lid's on nice and tight, it just takes a quick few minutes for this thing to come up to pressure. So once the pressure starts coming out of this thing, it's 6 minutes. 6 minutes for soup. It's incredible.
And after 6 minutes, turn off the heat and release the pressure.
So once all the pressure's released out of this thing, pop the lid off. We're gonna add in some coconut milk. Unfortunately, it's coming out of a can. If we were on the boat down in Mexico or in the tropics, I guarantee you Brenda would be making some coconut milk that we could put in here, and it would be incredible. We don't have any. We got a can. So just pop the lid off. And it smells pretty good. Coconut milk, a little curry powder. We're gonna mix this up. It's gonna be great.
After you add in the coconut milk, turn on the medium heat, melt this stuff in there, and then add some curry powder and salt and pepper to taste. And you're just about there.
So ideally, we'd have a blender to mix this all up, puree it. We don't have one, so we're doing it the old-fashioned way with one of these.
And after it's all mixed up and somewhat pureed, you got yourself a nice, thick, rich, hearty soup. And it's pretty great.
Hot, but delicious. Dinner time. See ya.
But that's about it for this episode. Thanks for watching, and join us next time as we leave Water Canyon behind and find ourselves out in some ghost towns and some pretty incredible hot springs.